Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a story full of complex, deeply emotional, and honestly incredibly messy family dynamics. We're going to explore Genesis 43. It's a profound ancient text that deals with favoritism, deep-seated resentment, and ultimately a truly breathtaking display of forgiveness.
Now, to set the stage here, I want you to picture a scenario that plays out in homes literally all across the world. Have any moms out there ever experienced a toddler's intense jealousy over a brand new baby? You know exactly the scene I'm talking about, right? The toddler is so used to being the absolute center of the universe, and suddenly, boom, they have to share their parents' attention. So they act out, they get visibly upset, and they demand to be held instead of the newborn. It's a perfect, everyday example that shows just how naturally we humans struggle with sharing love and attention. It is hardwired into us from a very, very young age.
And here's the thing, if that jealousy isn't addressed when we're toddlers, it just grows up right alongside us. That brings us to the core tension of this entire narrative. The source material asks this really profound, overarching question. What exactly does God want us to do with our imperfect, broken families? How in the world do we find healing in a family that has been completely fractured by favoritism and envy? Because the family we're looking at today, well, they were physically living under the same roof, but relationally speaking, they were miles and miles apart.
Okay, let's jump right into our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. A family running on empty. 2. Jacob's misplaced love. 3. Judah's remarkable growth. 4. Joseph's overflowing mercy. And 5. The beauty of mercy.
All right, part 1. A family running on empty.
So at this exact point in the narrative, the land is caught in the grip of a devastating 2-year famine. And we aren't talking about a minor food shortage here. The land is completely barren. To really grasp the sheer anxiety of this moment, think about your car's gas gauge. Imagine driving down a completely deserted highway and watching that digital display drop from 50 miles down to 10 to 1, and then finally hitting absolute 0. That is exactly what the patriarch of the family, Jacob, was doing with his family's food supply. They could have gone down to Egypt to buy food so much earlier, but Jacob just kept procrastinating. He literally waited until the food gauge hit 0 before he did anything.
You really have to ask, why would a patriarch do that? While Jacob was the leader of a 66-member clan, let that sink in. He was willing to let the food completely run out, risking the lives of all 66 people in his family simply because he was absolutely terrified of losing his one favorite son, Benjamin. The official in charge of the food down in Egypt had demanded that Benjamin be brought to him, and Jacob just stubbornly refused. He was willing to risk total mass starvation just to protect that one boy.
Which brings us to part 2, Jacob's misplaced love.
This entire starvation crisis was rooted in Jacob's overt favoritism. It's an obsession he originally had for his late wife Rachel, and then he just transferred all of it entirely onto her son Benjamin. Now, his love for Benjamin was real, but it was profoundly misplaced. It had lost its way and become incredibly destructive. The text actually contrasts this kind of obsession with the biblical definition of true love from 1 Corinthians 13, which tells us love is patient, it's kind, and it definitely lacks arrogance. True, divine love acts like a compass that always points north, toward God and toward the well-being of other people. Jacob's love, on the other hand, was totally self-serving, and because of that, it created deep, generational pain for the children who just weren't his favorites.
Let's pivot to part 3, Judah's remarkable growth. To really understand the brother who finally steps up and acts as the catalyst for change, Judah, we have to look at the ugly root of his past sins against his favored brother, Joseph. The philosopher Cornelius Plantinga Jr. frames envy in a really fascinating way. He says it's not just covetousness. Covetousness is simply wanting what someone else has with empty hands. But envy is much darker. It's actually wanting to empty the hands of the envied person. It carries this really deep personal resentment. It's a destructive rot that just ruins communities from the inside out. And it is exactly what consumed Judah in his youth. To fully appreciate how much Judah grows, we have to face his stark reality. Years earlier, driven by that exact toxic envy we just talked about, Judah was the boy who actually suggested selling his own flesh and blood brother Joseph into human trafficking for 20 pieces of silver. He didn't just want Joseph's fancy coat, he wanted to empty his hands entirely. He literally wanted to destroy Joseph's life.
Let's trace this timeline really quick to see how we got here. We start with that young, envious boy who sold his brother. Following that, there's a long, incredibly painful gap of about 13 to 15 years. For over a decade, these brothers live with just crushing guilt.
totally fractured family dynamics, and the constant, obvious neglect of their father. Fast forward to the present day, and a brutal famine has forced these now mature brothers to stand in Egypt, completely unknowingly, before the very brother they sold all those years ago.
Now, look at this incredible before and after contrast in Judah's character. When the family is literally starving at 0 miles to empty, Judah finally approaches his father. The envious, self-centered boy who once ruined his brother's life has transformed into a responsible, other-centered man. He literally offers his own life as collateral to protect Benjamin, telling his father he'll bear the blame forever if Benjamin isn't returned safely. It's a massive shift.
The source connects this huge transformation to a really powerful concept about maturity. The fundamental difference between boys and men is that immature boys care primarily for themselves. They're takers. Mature men, however, step up to take responsibility and actively care for the people around them. They protect. Facing starvation and the total collapse of his family, Judah finally steps out of his childish envy and steps up to lead.
Moving on to part 4, Joseph's overflowing mercy.
Now we get to shift perspectives over to Joseph, the brother who was sold into slavery, who has now remarkably risen the ranks to become second in command of all of Egypt. He holds absolute power of life and death over the exact men who ruined his youth. When he finally lays eyes on his younger brother Benjamin, the text tells us his emotions just overflowed. He had to hurry out to an inner room to weep. The original phrasing here essentially means he grew warm with mercy. Earlier in the story, Jacob had prayed that God Almighty would grant them mercy in Egypt. And this overwhelming wave of emotion from Joseph, it shows exactly how God miraculously and abundantly answered that prayer.
Think about it. Joseph had every worldly right to destroy this dysfunctional family. He could have easily exacted his revenge, but instead he chose mercy. Now, mercy is not giving the guilty what they actually deserve. It's a completely free gift for the receiver, but we really have to understand that it is profoundly costly for the person showing it. Joseph swallowed a decade of pain, total betrayal, and bitter injustice to offer his brothers a clean slate.
And that leads us to our final section, part 5, the beauty of mercy.
This ancient act of forgiveness forms an absolutely powerful theological bridge for anyone studying this text today. Joseph's earthly mercy, pardoning his brothers and starting the hard work of restoring a terribly broken family, is seen as a direct prelude and a foreshadowing of the divine mercy of Jesus Christ. Just as Judah pledged his own life for Benjamin and Joseph absorbed the incredibly deep personal cost of his brother's sins, the text argues that Jesus pledged eternal safety by paying the ultimate price for an entire world of dysfunctional sinners.
To really bring this explainer home, the source poses 3 powerful application questions, and I want you to genuinely reflect on these for a second. First, what does misplaced love look like in your own life today? Second, what is going to happen to your own community if you don't turn away from envious ways? And third, what does God's mercy look like in your life right now? I really urge you to think about how these ancient lessons reflect the complex, sometimes messy dynamics in your own family. I want to leave you with one final, kind of provocative thought to chew on today. If you have been the recipient of such incredible forgiveness and grace, will God's mercy terminate with you, or will it flow through you to your own imperfect family? Think about that for a while. Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today. I really hope this deep dive sparked your curiosity and gave you a fresh perspective on the true beauty of mercy. Catch you next time.